Assalamualaikum, sir.
Walaikum.
Sir, going back to one thing, going back to square one, this is one very important thing we have discussed this in the past session as well, that elites are enjoying their own comfort. So before going to the main topic, I would like to ask you one thing, that how do you think we can remove their comfort, the elites? Because right now we see the elites are enjoying, they are just seeing the short-term benefits. What about the long term? By the time they have taken everything, they are in their comfort zone, they are making money. They will also pass on to their other generations. But how are we going to remove their comfort zone? How are we going to make them realize that this is you need to focus on the long term, not the short term? This is one thing we have discussed in the past sessions as well, and today again this has come up. So I need to ask you this one.
You see, I am making money from surreptitious means, right? Now you will come to me and say, look, this is not right, this is not moral, this is not good, go away, don't do it. I'll say, the door is open, take a hike. I don't even listen to you. It never changes that way. You can't go hat in hand and say, please change your ways, stop enjoying yourself, and let me get part of your enjoyment. It doesn't happen that way. What happens is basically that when you present in a social environment an ideology which is contrary to the ideology in existence, the change automatically happens. Because if I'm making money from surreptitious means, I will be unable to do so. It's as simple as that. So we are not suggesting in any way, and it cannot be suggested that way, that you go hat in hand telling people to seize an indulgence. Forget about making money, talk about even bad habits. I smoke, I drink, I dance, I listen to music. You come to me and you tell me, stop it. It's not good. It's not good for you. It's not good for all of us. I'm in your neighborhood, it's not good for me. Say, I'm sorry.
By making our own ideology or positioning myself and telling people that this is the right ideology. Who is going to define the right ideology? If the people are agreeing, but the one who's in the top, he's not agreeing to that ideology. Who's going to define what is the right ideology? There are going to be opinions. People are going to criticize that ideology as well. So if what I have seen, what my intake is, I position myself, and obviously I see Pakistan has positioned itself in some way or the other as well. They have seen that China is taking advantage of this situation. We have volunteered ourselves, and as you just said, that we have subscribed to this opportunity of CPEC as well. But then again, we have our own mission or our own ideology here as well. But who is going to define that this is the right ideology? There are other ideologies as well.
Can I add something to that? For example, if we talk about our own ideology based on equity and the principles of equality, like you had clearly stated, liberalism also finds its ideology from the concepts of liberty and legal jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And we see the dichotomy when capitalism comes in, and I see your point, that we need to have our own ideology. I understand that. But when we say that our ideology is not driven by sects or the clergy, aren't we opening doors for a new sect which states that what we say is not driven by what you say, and therefore this is our interpretation of it? The question is, where do we put our finger and say this is our ideology and claim it is Islamic, rather than being generic or can be claimed by any other ideology in existence as well, like liberalism?
Well, first, let's put the debate of sects and their points of view, their different points of view, to rest by going back to the Quran. The Quran in Surah Rum, the Romans, is the 30th surah in the present compilation order. and you go to ayat number 31, 32, and it clearly declares that these sects are made by you, and you pride in the fact that my sect is bigger and stronger. Sects have really no place in Islam. When you are adopting, when we talk about the adoption of an ideology, you did that earlier on by putting a clause in your constitution and that everything within the constitution has to be in consonance with Islam. Objectives resolution, as it is called. The objectives resolution was then consigned to institutions like the Ideological Council of Pakistan. I mean, they have not, from the time of inception to date, given any ruling on interest, for instance. Basically, there's no dispute among sects. Interest. You can't borrow on interest. The minute you go and say you can't borrow on interest, where does all these donors go? You have to assetize. You have to give them something tangible. It becomes a trading deal. It does not remain money on interest. That particular institution never gave you a ruling on the principles of the medium of exchange being a commodity. So what the hell are they doing there? What are they doing there at my cost, at the cost of the 220 million people paying taxes? What are they doing there except for looking at the moon and telling us whether it is the 1st of the month or the 10th? So these are drain holes. And these are drain holes deliberately in place to shift your focus from real issues. Real issues are that you cannot borrow as an Islamic republic. Forget about being an Islamic republic then. Call yourself a banana republic. It works fine. If you call yourself an Islamic republic, then please be Islamic. We are talking about issues here which have got nothing to do with the Shia fiqh or the Sunni fiqh or the fiqh of anybody else. We are talking about principal injunctions of Islam as have been prescribed in the dictum in the Quran, and there is no dispute among the sects on that. There is no interest. So your financial model cannot be based on interest. The medium of exchange cannot be a commodity. Why are your mullahs not ruling on it? There is a Jamaat-e-Islami here, for instance. I don't know, in existence before the partition or before the foundation of Pakistan. Give me one ruling where they have gone on to the basic rules or basic principles of the ideology. So when we talk about, like you put the question, I mean, who is going to accept it? It's not who is going to accept it. We have to accept it. Why? Because we are in the majority. As we said as I told you in the last session, starting from the president to a janitor, there are only 2.6 million people in the bureaucracy that comprise the bureaucracy in this country, including the politicians and the parliamentarians and the rest of them. 2.6 million people. We are 220 million people. We are all predominantly Muslims. We all say Allahu Akbar, we all bow down. In this mosque or that mosque or that mosque, we all monotheists. What are we seeking? We are seeking the writ of the Quran to be established, even if it takes a judicial course. And that's it. So consensus development, and then the invoking of the writ which has come about as a consequence of the development of consensus. So this exercise is for consensus development.
I can't help but think, like, for example, in the presence of a situation where in the Quran, inna means beshak and ma means nahi and innama together means chunke, how are we going to develop consensus?
I'm not an expert in the Arabic language.
I'll just The question to what I actually meant rather than using analogies. The question is, when the word from which we derive our ideology, or we will derive our ideology because there is no one Sharia law, when the mere translation of it has to be sought out from books in which one word may mean something else, and therefore there are interpretations of the word, what the word may mean. How can we have a consensus on a unified ideology, and how can we say that there are not conflicts when there are clear-cut conflicts on the mere definition of riba itself?
You see, again, we have to follow the principle of democracy here. Insofar as riba is concerned, the predominant lot of Muslims on spread over all the sects completely are in agreement that riba, as we understand riba, is definitely a prohibition in Islam. There are a lot of harams and halals which have been, which there is no dispute. The disputes are created by the clergy to validate their existence. The basic principles in the Quran are simple and are known to everybody without any dispute. And here we are talking about managing a country. If you put the issue of riba to a referendum, I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that the predominant lot of this population will agree with the fact that we should not be taking money on interest. Full stop. So when you do that, where will the ruling elite run? Where will they get the money from? They will have to adopt a course. That course has been absent. How do you economically model a nation state to stand up on your feet and survive? That is what we are trying to push here through these particular sessions, so that they have a model in place. The model can be debated, and it can have different variations. It can have different sensitivities, that all right, this thing should come in stage 1 and that thing should come in stage 2 and so on and so forth. But the model has to be there. And that model has to be in consonance with the requirements of the Quran. This particular deterrence of promoting different interpretations of the Shariat, different interpretations of the Quran, has been a funded, very heavily funded initiative of the people who want to keep the status quo of the world for governance as is, through nation states, through monarchies, through clerics. And if we don't become wise to this in 70 years, then I don't think we'll ever become wise to it. It's an open book. And they have the arrogance today and the audacity today to openly talk about it in a way to mock our stupidity, our subservience, that all right, what can you do? We'll kick you around, you will still follow, because you need our printed paper. You don't have one of yours. You don't have a model of yours. You don't have economic autarky. You do not have any roadmap, any destination defined. So in the management of the state, sociological destination and economic destinations have to be very clearly in view. The roadmaps have to be defined, and then you tread on. So anybody who is the elite today or the ruling elite today will have to, because of being in the minority, fall in line. They cannot resist it. They will not be able to resist it. And that, incidentally, is the future history of the entire planet. The people who are trying to govern this on the basis of a variety of industrial leads will have to give in to the majority. I mean, don't forget the population of the world is now 7.7 billion people. And the people calling the shots and the fiddles are just people you can count on your fingertips.
A question regarding what you said earlier about how we can have a referendum to decide what the meaning of the word would be, or how the Islamic ideology can come throughout referendum. My question is, when you have a top 1% ruling in this country for almost 70 years based on democracy, how do you think that a democratic referendum would come back with a good kind of ideology that does not benefit only that top 1%?
You see, let's go into the neighborhood. Let's talk about a recent revolution which happened in Iran. Right? You have an old cleric who flew in from France, and he took over the country from a monarchy which was very, strongly in the saddle, well placed, well entrenched, and over 100 years, and he took over. Although the outfall of that revolution is a different subject, but the change did come about. What enabled him to take over was consensus by a mass majority at that particular point in time. And the consensus was developed based on the validity of his message. That message was in denial of the monarchy that was in place. So the people sided with him, and a change came about. In this country, we are not looking for a Khomeini. We are looking for a plan. We are looking for the identification of a social destination, of an economic destination, and a roadmap to those destinations. That is what we have tried to deliver through the book, and through the second book, and through other writings. And we are now trying to develop some consensus. I'm sure the ruling elite, because they are not monarchs, they are not a monarchy, they are only an institution, they will see some valid points, and they will see a snowballing effect into the development of consensus. It cannot be ignored. They will see it, the world will see it. And the valid points from this will emerge. Either they will change or they will be forced to change. Because no amount of military might has ever in human history been able to fight the will and consensus of people.
Sir, when you take a loan from an institution, you'll end up paying interest, and they will so much overburden you with interest that you are going to keep on paying interest throughout your life. And today we are not just overburdened by US, we are also on a lease plan by China as well. What I got from your plan was that there shouldn't be any taxes on land, labor, and capital. We should free our land, labor, and capital. This is one thing that you mentioned. So, how would you run the entire country by freeing up your land, labor, and capital? Is it a good plan? And again, going back to what I was mentioning earlier, what is the strategy that you are so much overburdened with interest that it is increasing day by day? How would you get out of that interest? How would you pay that loan first and then structure a model to go further?
So even if we even if we decide to do that, if we go back and decide to make an ideology for ourselves and, take consensus and make the strategy and the plan, don't you think it's gonna take a lot of time for us to get there? What which you are actually looking at, like the picture that you're looking at, the ideology?
So it's not about it. Sorry, it's not about. It is going to take a lot of time. This is a long run process. But is it the right strategy, or are there any better strategies? This is my question. This is what my question is about decolonization. And the other thing is, I need to ask you a plan about getting out of that loan, like getting out of that interest, because population is increasing. Our GDP is not increasing by that much amount. Our port is already in the hands of China. China can exploit all our resources in that particular region. So how do you get out of that trap?
Between the two of you, you've put up at least 3 different questions. Okay. First, the question of which you raised, you misquoted me or misunderstood me. To run government, you need certain resources. So instead of having it from 107 different heads of accounts, you have it from one. That is what I said. So the factors of production, if they are land, labor, capital, and enterprise, then land is the only thing which needs to be taxed. So hypothetically, if you need $100 or 100, I beg your pardon, 100 rupees to run the government, the cost of the army, cost of the civil bureaucracy, cost of the judiciary, cost of running the parliaments, 100 rupees, hypothetically. All that 100 rupees have to come from land. So, if in the plan which I have identified for our economic destination and the roadmap there towards is that we go for urbanization, 100% urbanization, and we base our government revenue from land revenue only. The resource required to run the government must come only from land. And that in the fiscal model which I have presented in writing, and I will share it with you people, gives you the arithmetic. And I have done that for the government about 20 years ago, earlier on, in many reports. Gives you the same amount of revenue plus 7 times, right? There are a lot of land in use which has caused regress and stagnation in our economy instead of it being productive. For instance, like we quoted in the last program, you can take railways, you can take any of these institutions. They've got a lot of land. They're not focused on their core business. They are focused on getting rentals, developing housing schemes. The Air Force is developing malls. The Army is developing housing schemes. And the Navy is probably developing something similar near Gwadar. I mean, this is not their business. The core business, PNSC has got rental properties, right? They're supposed to be buying ships. They should not be in this business at all. So you have actually planted the feudal model from the 18th century in this economy for us to live with. It cannot work that way. About the interest factor. When you have your own money, when you're not paying, you're not reliant on foreign printed paper, the factor of interest becomes 0. When you go and create in your economic model the 100% urbanization, you sell your debt in 2 days, the entire 100 billion, just in 2 days, out of the window. Because whoever will want to come and develop it for you will buy your debt. This also has been proposed to the government. Why they distance themselves from good propositions is because they lose their hold. And that is mentioned in my book. They lose their hold on the population. So your population are really captives of 2.6 million people or less. Similarly, the social destination. You have to establish equity. You have to establish a level playing field. The judiciary is impaired. There are different set of rules for the 2.6 million, and there are different set of rules for the 220 million. I mean, you can see the political dramas on the television these days. All they are talking about is one scoundrel or the other. I mean, there's a greater focus on thieves and robbers and scoundrels than on anything to do with human achievement made by the 220 million people. And the reason is simple, that even that industry has to survive on the dole they are getting to survive. So unless these two particular destinations for the nation state are in clear view and the roadmaps there towards, you will not be able to see even the consensus development we are talking about. And the time, insofar as the question you put up, the time, that is what our selling expertise will enable. If you can sell the idea fast enough, you have consensus. The minute you have consensus, you have change.
Basically, I want to know what is the idea behind suggesting that we have one tax head instead of several tax heads, land, for example. If we are getting the same amount of tax out of multiple tax heads and the same amount of tax from one tax head, what difference would it make? Also, would it be easier for the people to do tax evasion then if we have tax only on land? They would do business and everything, and that would become tax-free completely. They would stop owning lands. So would that be easier for them to do tax evasion, or would it be more difficult, according to you?
That is a similar point that I wanted to make as well. And plus, like, if I take an example for myself, if I'm living off rent, wouldn't I not pay taxes then? Because I would not own land.
Is the question over? All right. You see, when you talk of land revenue, it is directly related to existence of a legal entity. Individuals are legal entities. Factories or anything which is incorporated is a legal entity. Institutions are legal entities. So when we talk of land revenue here, we are talking of all legal entities paying a tax for the amount of land they are using, because you're not suspended in the air, you are on the ground. Whether you are living in a rented premises or you are living in your premise which you have leased from the government, or irrespective, you are paying a certain amount of tax. If my memory serves me right, when I was advising or I was co-chairing the Prime Minister's task force on National Affairs and Donors Coordination, I calculated a figure which I presented to the government, of course, at that time, of 3 paisa per square foot per month for land in use, of course, which included agricultural land. And the revenue figures which came out were 7 times the amount of revenue we were collecting. Tax evasion becomes impossible in this mechanism. If you are alive, you are on the ground, you are a taxpayer, full stop. How does it compare with the current model, where you have 107 plus taxation heads? Then I'd like to quote a merchant, an ex-advisor of the central bank, who said that if you honestly pay all these 107 heads of account, under all these 107 heads of accounts, taxes, you'd be paying about 20% more than your income. So there is an element of theft, cheating, which you are pushing into the society for people to adopt to be able to survive. It is not truth-based, which is again against our ideology. And no sect can counter it. No sect can come and say that lies is permitted in Islam. It is truth-based.
Shah Sahab, you mentioned that America has currently is planning to pump 3.2 trillion dollars in the international market. Don't you think it is being backed by the gold reserve that they have since the World War II that happened, and they got a hold of a whole lot of gold that exists in the world and has the majority of that right now. Plus, as I see it, it's the economic concept that when you print money, the inflation goes up, and the whole lot of factors follow. Plus, I also have this question number two, which is if you want to print, if we want to print our own money, what backing would we give? And don't you think it is important to peg to some commodity or some currency which is has the international standing and is used around the world?
All right. First, America. Let me use some American terminology here for you to understand this. What is good for the goose is not good for the gander. When it comes to America, they have double standards. The way they deal with themselves and the way they deal with the world, two different things, number one. Number two, in the American model, the money is not issued by the government, it's issued by a private company called the Federal Reserves. Number three, is circulated like you would play Russian roulette. I don't know if you have, but but that's how it works. So what they're doing is they're playing with, like what they did with Turkey, for instance. They made money available in 2008, and they said, all right, 1.5%, take as much as you want. And they took a lot, they developed their infrastructure, and then it was suddenly called back. Now, the productivity level in that economy did not rise to meet the debt servicing because it was given for a tenure, and they shortened the tenure. They brought them down to their knees, the lira fell. So this is what they're doing, sitting in their penthouses probably, deciding the fate of different countries by throwing in money or printed paper, pulling it back. So we should stop, meeting their bluff. There were stronger terminologies to be used here, but I mean, let's take our own route. Insofar as we printing our own money is concerned, yes, we should print our money. But if we link your money to a tangible, then your trading will be dependent on that tangible, not on your medium of exchange, because your medium of exchange will be for domestic usage. And if you restrict your money for domestic usages, then those players sitting in Europe and America will not, like Soros, will not be able to make a run on your currency. They did that with Malaysia. When they saw the economy was coming up, they made a run on their currency, got the ringgit to come to the floor. It was saved by a clever man there at that time in office, probably he's still there, Mahathir. And but if you make a rise, they call a shot. They try to shoot you down. Because remember, you were created to serve their interest. What we are talking about is a goodbye situation. All right, we were created to serve your interests. Then we refuse to do it. Now we've had enough of you. Bye-bye. And that is the tangible difference we are talking about right here. Whether it gets invoked tomorrow morning or it gets invoked after 10 years or 20 years, it doesn't make a difference to me. Our job here is to crystallize a model, bring it to the table, and let the generations who will lead this country or will look at this country pick it up or discard it.
I'll just put 3 questions on the table. For example, from what I could understand was that we need to shape an ideology. We might not presently have it, we need to shape it. If that is the case, because that's what I understood. If that is the case, who do you see as the class of people shaping that ideology? Secondly, how do we see it taking over the system? For example, we're talking about building a consensus which is quite democratic. Whereas when we look at the 2 systems of governance that Islam has seen, at the classical time of it, it was a caliphate, which was more of an oligarchy, whereas and imamat, which was more of a divine right to rule transferred by the Prophet to his family. It was not democratic, because based on a verse of Quran that is, lights and shadows cannot be equal. A person with knowledge and a person without knowledge cannot be equal, derived out of the Quran, fueled by that ideology. So which means will we use to implement that ideology, which we establish in whichever way possible? That is the second question. Final question, you talked about sticking to this alliance, this nexus that we're talking about. We talked about there is nothing tangible in replacing one lord with another. But with China, we have seen the BRICS nations transforming themselves through fiscal, monetary, and technological innovations, like Brazil did with Bolsa Familia, like China did with its own monetary and fiscal innovations. So there was a tangible effort associated with that alliance that those countries formed, and they rescued their people out of poverty. Why? So the question is, till the time our plan takes over, the prioritization, do you see, because I completely agree with the ideology needs to be in place. Question is, will we prioritize implementing an ideology, or will we welcome these incremental efforts in fiscal monetary innovations by the time we have an ideology?
You see, ideology, however you would like to view it, is like a name you give to a child when he or she is born. Pakistan was not given that name, or has not been given that name until right now. We haven't got that name. What we have said is that it is the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, which in essence, grammatical essence, are conflicting terms, right? The republic concept comes from an alien ideology. Islam has got something else to present. And then there are variations in interpreting the whole concept. However, we were founded on the basis that we are Muslims and we need a separate home, and therefore this territory belongs to the Indian Muslims who will be living here. Now, the ideology which we need to adopt is already there in place. It is not something which we have to structure anew. We are talking about basics, very, very basic, fundamental points on which there is no dissent among any sect. Like riba, like lies, like haram, like halal. I mean, there are no conflicts here. They are absolutely watertight. And if you go on the watertight concepts, then there will be very little left on the table to structure or devise by way of a new ideology, which is the first part of your question. So the plans which I have presented for a social destination and for an economic destination and the roadmaps there towards are based on those factors of Islamic ideology which have absolutely no conflict whatsoever. The conflict has been precipitated, has been encouraged by those who have interest in our natural resources, our cheap labor, so-called. And that's why they talk of the Shia crescent, they talk of the Sunni crescent, and they talk of Islamic fundamentalism, and they talk of Islamic terrorism. And these are engineered terms which have come from the West. It's got nothing to do with the unity of the Ummah as it ought to be or as it is supposed to be. And that is to serve their interest. And people from within us have supported that for their own private vested interests.
The conflict of Sunni Shia, the division of sect, I don't know why, but I believe this is not from the external, this is very much internal. Because I've seen people, I've seen our communities fighting with each other. And there was this one thing which I read somewhere that हम तो मुसलमानों को मार रहे हैं मुसलमान बोलकर और मुसलमान आपस में एक दूसरे को मार रहे हैं काफिर बोलकर. This hit me very hard. क्योंकि this was one thing where I totally agree with this statement that this is very internal rather than West influencing this on us.
I can beg to differ, and I'll tell you why. Because in human history, in the management of societies, there have been two sources, two poles in every society. One, which was called the monarch, and the other, that was called the cleric. Right? They have been pseudo-partners, apparently opposed to each other, but they have been pseudo-partners. The monarch came, usurped your land, usurped your liberties, and said, you have to pay me, you have to work for me, otherwise I'm going to kill you. And he said, all right, since I have to live here on this piece of land, I owe. And that's why you were called a subject of the king. And then he abused your labor, didn't adequately compensate your labor. And he tormented you and put you into a great deal of inconvenience for basic living purposes. So you went crying to the cleric. And the cleric said, well, let me comfort you. This world is for this chap, but the heavens are for you. So he sold the concept of the hereafter to you and said, all right, once you go there, you will get, palaces, and you will get honey, and you will get fruits, and you will get women, and you will get whatever else you need. So you got to be patient here. So you were forced to succumb to that oppression. Then comes Islam, and it categorically declares that no, you don't have to stand up for oppression, you have to fight oppression in all its format, wherever you see it, with everything you have, your life included. And that is good for the society. We are living in a globally oppressive order, the format of which has trickled down to your nation state. The supporters of this particular format are people like the ruling elite, like the clerics, anybody who's getting money is supporting the oppressive structure. Fighting that oppressive structure is your duty. If you subscribe to the ideology of Islam, you have to oppose it. And that's it. For that, you don't need a big beard. You do not need to be a cleric. You cannot copy a model which is oppressing you. You do not have to be a monarch. But if you are a monotheist and you subscribe to the oneness, or you worship the one deity, You have to oppose all forms of oppression. This is economic oppression which is being committed on you. This is social oppression which is being committed on you. On both counts, you have to negate it. And that is what our ideology is. It is just not riba. It is the monetary order. It is the social order that you need to fight. And for that, no sect or no leader of any sect can stand up and counter it. And to answer one of your earlier questions, it does not mean the creation of another sect. It cannot. It means the empowering of the judicial system. It means the promulgation of the right laws that will establish social equity and material justice. That's all.
Thank you for watching. Click the videos on screen to watch more and make sure to subscribe for upcoming videos. Let the winds of change blow